two extreme views of passions and emotions. One view was the old Greek view that passions are all wrong. That was the philosophy of the Stoics. And then there was the philosophy of the Epicureans, who believed that you should always give way to your passions.
Travel along, Catholic pilgrims, for 1 year as we learn from Venerable Fulton Sheen, one of the greatest Catholic teachers in modern times. Join me, Amy Thomas, once a week for a short reading out of Bishop Sheen's book, Way to Inner Peace. Hello, Catholic pilgrims, and welcome to week 21. This week we are talking about passions, and I'm pretty sure that all the way back in the 50s, even before I was a twinkle in my parents' eyes, Bishop Sheen wrote this with me in mind because I am often told that I am a very passionate person. It's probably the thing my husband tells me the most. And he quite enjoys it because he loves to tease me so that I will get quote unquote riled up. And for some reason, men just really enjoy doing that. My husband especially. He knows how to push my buttons, and so he loves to tease me about certain things, and I will fall for it nearly every time and get worked up, and he's just grinning away. I know he's going to listen to this, and I'm sure he's just grinning away right now. The problem is that he has enlisted our children in his sick quest to gain joy from getting me riled up, and our kids do it as well. They find ways to really stoke the flames underneath me, and I fall for it all the time, but I can't help it. I'm a passionate person. So I found this week's readings very relatable, and like I said, I'm pretty sure he had me in mind. So the 3 points I want us to pay attention to as we're working our way through this is enthusiasm, knowledge, and passions. Number 21, passion. Listening to a political figure give a television report to the nation on a world crisis with somewhat the same passion that he would read off the price of cheese in Switzerland and Burma makes one wonder if there is any fire or enthusiasm left for great causes. Obviously, enthusiasm has something to do with passion, but that word generally invokes two kinds of extreme and wrong reactions. One view is that passion is something we ought to be ashamed of. The other is that passion is always right, and that if we do not give way to its demands, we hurt our personality. To revive passion in hearts, one must first understand it. Passion signifies receiving or suffering something or submitting to something. From this, follow two indispensable conditions for passion: knowledge and some organic or physical change in our sensible nature. First, knowledge. Passion cannot operate unless we have an idea about something. A woman will not get mad at a bargain counter unless she knows that someone is getting the better selection. We speak of people becoming enthused about some idea, and an idea is knowledge. No one undergoes the passion of sadness without first having a knowledge of a loss or a disaster. Second, passion has its seat in the body or the animal nature of man. It is the echo of the knowledge in our physical structure, but it is not knowledge. Passion implies sensible changes, such as the flushing of the cheeks, the dilating of the pupils, and the tensing of many of the muscles. Passion is not a reflex, like the watering of a dog's mouth in the presence of food. It is true that there are many similarities between passion in animals and passion in man, but it must never be forgotten that in man, passion cannot operate unless something is known. The eye has a reflex action when someone is about to thrust his finger into it, but passion is a conscious affair. It is something that happens to a creature endowed with reason and free will. The next point to remember is that at the root of all passions are love and its opposite, hate. Hence, our passions are either for the pursuit of what we love or escape from what we hate. Because we love sleep, we can immediately think of certain passions that would be aroused because we are denied it. For example, anger at the porter on the train who called us 2 hours too early, despair when we cannot get to sleep at night, hope that the visitors who dropped in for a few minutes will not stay for a few hours. I know of someone who at 10 o'clock puts on a nightcap, walks through the living room, and facetiously bids everyone good night. Because we hate certain things, other passions which are related to struggle with difficulties also arise. For example, fear that we may not have enough security for old age, flight from a mad dog, etc. Coming back to want of fire and enthusiasm in our politicians, the reason is rather obvious. They have no great central overwhelming cause to which they are dedicated with the full fervor of their being, and they have no great shock at evil or wrong. Nothing has so much killed enthusiasm as the pragmatic notion that there is nothing that is absolutely true, right, and good for which one ought to consecrate his life. And there is nothing so evil that one ought to die rather than surrender to it. Indifference kills passion while skepticism deadens them. Democracy does not mean that because both sides ought to be heard, therefore there is no right side. There are two sides to flypaper. There are passions where there are ideas that lead to action. Democracy today finds it hard to make up its mind on what is right. Communism, on the contrary, made up its mind on what was wrong. All its passions were devoted to evil. Evil today is starting the fires that are burning down the world. Leadership in democracies today cannot be expected to come out of the ashes of spineless indifference. When more get mad, not because they lose money, but because right is ignored and wrong enthroned, then the fires will come back to democracy. And these fires will burn like beacons, summoning men to a finer and better world. When I first started on my blogging, podcasting journey way back in 2013, I called myself Passionate Purpose because I've always been told that I'm a pretty passionate person. But it lacked, a real direction. People didn't really know what I was about. People didn't know what I was passionate about. And some people mistook it as something else. They thought I sold lingerie or something, which was kind of crazy. I didn't even conceive of the idea that anybody would take it kind of in an unsavory way, I guess. But yeah, they did. But thankfully, I found my name, and I think people understand way more what I'm passionate about. I love this reading. I love this reading because it speaks so much to so much of what we're going through in our world today. And I want to start back on the very beginning where he talks about knowledge. That's so true, isn't it? We only get passionate about something if we have knowledge of something. When I was in college, I was a very passionate, outspoken student in my classes. It often got me in trouble. I would often challenge my very, very liberal professors on many of their thoughts and beliefs. And I oftentimes was the only one who did it. And the crazy thing is that before I went to college, yeah, I knew there were people who had different views than the conservative view. I had never really heard them articulated out loud. And so when I got into my classes and I gained knowledge of what people were thinking, I couldn't believe it. So much of it was untrue. So much of it was just wrong. So much of it was an embracing of evil things that there was no way I could remain quiet. I do believe God gave me the gift of, speaking out, if that's a gift. I have learned to harness it better. I haven't always done that very well, and I still struggle to do that. The Holy Spirit definitely has to rein me in a lot of times. But I could not stand the fact that no one was challenging them on these ideas, and it made me very passionate to speak out for the conservative side. And so I did. And I got bad grades on papers because I did so. I was often called names in class by professors, by a professor specifically. And yeah, I didn't mind it so much though. I mean, it was a little frustrating that nobody else stood up with me. But I have never been one to be afraid to go into the fray. And so it didn't really bother me. But I definitely had to hear their side and gain knowledge of what they were saying in order to feel passionate about it. And that was something I had never really thought about before, but it is true. You know, if you don't know about something, you're not going to be passionate about it at all. And so one of the things I think is a real struggle for all of us in the 21st century is we are bombarded with things that we are supposed to be passionate about all the time, everywhere, everything. Because we live in this information society, we are constantly getting updates on our phones, or we're seeing things on social media, and we're getting all this knowledge, and it makes us passionate about certain things. And the thing is we cannot honestly be passionate about every single thing that comes up. But in a way, because of social media and because of, you know, our media, our big media outlets, we feel this pressure to be passionate about every single thing. And what happens is a fire starts over here, like a figurative fire. Fire starts over here, and we're all mad, and we're all supposed to be outraged. And then within like 2 days, that fire is put out, and then the next fire comes up, and we're all supposed to be mad and outraged and do something. And then in 2 days, everybody has forgotten about it. And then the next thing comes up, and it goes just on and on and on. And it's exhausting. And you can get, you know, they call it passion fatigue. You can get that. And what do we do? What do we do, especially as Catholics? We should be against evil, and we should be passionate about a lot of things. He talks about in our readings how passion can be, you know, over things that we love or over things that we hate. And, you know, this was really spelled out for me back in 2020 when the George Floyd incident happened. I was not quick to create a judgment about it because I don't like doing that right away. I don't like being fed from the media how I'm supposed to believe about something. And so I wanted time to just see how things played out. I knew that both sides of the political aisle were going to spin it in a certain way. And I wanted to be able to form my own clear conscience judgment about the issue. And so I didn't say anything for a while on social media, and it was everywhere. I mean, you remember back to it being everywhere. Racism talk was everywhere. White privilege, the cops are horrible. It was just non-stop bombardment. And I couldn't process it all. And like I said, I don't like to be forced into creating an opinion on the matter until everybody's kind of calmed down. So anyway, at that time, I had written a post basically saying that I can't make a judgment call on this yet. We don't have all the information. We haven't seen the entire video. We don't know everything. And so I feel like we need to just kind of step back and wait for more information to come in. Well, that was not a popular opinion. It was not. And one woman in particular just blasted me on Instagram. She went on to call me all kinds of names, and I was part of the problem. and that this is something that we have to be outraged about. And I said to her, I'm taking a step back. I'm not saying that I'm never going to form an opinion about it. I don't want to be forced into believing a political storyline when that may not be true. And she did not want to hear that at all. And she was talking about, I need to be super passionate about this, and there's systemic racism and all this stuff. And I said, if this turns out to be a truly racist, killing, definitely, I will totally condemn it. But I'm just not ready to make that judgment call right now. I don't have all the facts. And we talked back and forth, and she went on to say that basically I have to be passionate, super duper passionate about all the injustices in the world. I mean, she really did kind of say that. And I said to her, that's just not possible. I think that people have their things that they're very passionate about, and we shouldn't have a ton of them, because we will expend our energy and be spread too thin if we have too many. And we won't be able to give fully to something that we're very passionate about. And I think that's more beneficial to society if we find that one or two things that we find ourselves very passionate about, and we give ourselves to that cause and focus our attention on that. I think we will do the world, a better service by doing that than, being super duper passionate about 10,000 different things. As a human being, I just cannot do that. I just don't have the time. I have a family. I have to do things. I have to run errands. I have to, live my life. If I were to try to expend energy on every outrage in the world, I would go crazy. And she did not agree with me. And I told her, I said, the thing that I'm most passionate as like a social justice cause, I would say, is sexual violence. Because as a victim, it means a lot to me to get the truth out there and to talk about it. And it's what my degrees are in. And so I have studied this. I have worked with victims. I've worked with police officers. I've been in the weeds on this subject. It's something I know a lot about. And it is something I'm super passionate about. I like educating people on it. I like giving parents tips on how to protect their children, and, so on and so forth. I was just trying to explain this to her. She wasn't going to hear any of that whatsoever. I had to be full board passionate about everything. And like I said, I think that's a real danger. And I think a lot of us are suffering from that these days, and we get exhausted, and we just feel like we can't give of ourselves in any way. And we're trying to do the right thing by being super outraged about everything that's bad. And if we don't, we're going to get name called, and we're going to be, shamed, and we're going to have guilt heaped upon us. But I am here to tell you that when you're outraged about everything, it comes to a point where you lose enthusiasm. And that's what he's talking about here today with politicians. On page 75, he says, coming back to want of fire and enthusiasm in our politicians, the reason is rather obvious. They have no great, central, overwhelming cause to which they are dedicated with a full fervor of their being, right? Because we constantly see our politicians and our media pundits on television getting outraged over everything, being super duper passionate over every little thing. And it kind of comes off as fake. Like, we don't really buy that they're really that passionate about it, because at every turn they're freaking out over something, and nothing ever really gets done. Because, in a day, if you freak out about 10 things, you're running around trying to put out fires, and then another one comes up, and then another one comes up, and you really don't ever get anything done. And so where he talks about they don't have any great central overwhelming cause that they can really dedicate themselves to. And that's what I would like to see us as Catholics do. find your thing that you are really passionate about. I mean, we have saints that, didn't go into the fray for every little thing, right? I mean, Dorothy Day, she started, a social justice movement. That was like her thing. And St. Mother Teresa was helping the destitute and the poor, and that was her thing. And St. Damien in Malachi in Hawaii, he was there helping the lepers, and that was his thing. And because they had their thing that they were super passionate about, their central focus, they were able to affect really, really great change. And it's impressive. But they weren't, scattered in their mind over 100 different things. They found that thing that spoke to their heart and they went after it. And that's impressive. It doesn't mean that they don't care about other things. It wasn't as if I didn't care about the George Floyd issue and that I had zero opinion about it and I was completely indifferent to it. It just wasn't one of those things where I felt like my voice was going to really make a difference. And that was hard for some people to hear and to accept. But I really think that that's what we have to do, is find our thing. And it may be one or two things. He goes on to say, nothing has so much killed enthusiasm as the pragmatic notion that there is nothing that is absolutely true, right, and good for which one ought to consecrate his life. And there is nothing so evil that one ought to die rather than surrender to it. Indifference kills passion while skepticism deadens them. Democracy does not mean that because both sides ought to be heard, therefore there is no right side. There are two sides to flypaper. There are passions where there are ideas that lead to action. And so this is kind of where we're at right now. We're in this weird phase where we're told that there's no objective truth. Reality can be distorted. There's no real good or evil. It's all just whatever you think. And this is what democracy has gotten us, because we've given value to both sides of the argument. And instead of saying, okay, let's hear both sides of the argument, you present your case, you present your case, and then we're going to debate it and talk it out. We don't do that anymore. That's actually a very ancient way of dealing with things, all the way back with Socrates and Plato. We've abandoned that because when they would do it, when the ancients would do it and they would present an idea and they would debate it out and they would hear the different sides, the goal was to find the truth. Today, what we do is we say, well, okay, I heard your side and I heard your side, and I neither one is right because I can't say that either side is right because there's no objective reality, and so we're just going to open the door to everything. And so just kind of be indifferent to truth and goodness and beauty and all of that. Everything is subjective, and that's where we are right now. And so it's hard to be super passionate over things when there is no right or wrong, and we aren't allowed to say there is a right or wrong. And if we do say there is a right or wrong, we're shouted down from the outrage mob. And that's difficult. It is difficult. But I love what he says here at the end. Leadership in democracies today cannot be expected to come out of the ashes of spineless indifference. Oh my gosh, I love that. Spineless indifference. Take a stand, somebody. Just take a stand and go with it. There are plenty of people who are trying to take stands on nonsense and illogical ideas. Those of us that believe in truth and goodness and beauty and right thinking, good grief, take a stand. Take a stand and don't have spineless indifference. He goes on to say, when more get mad, not because they lose money, but because right is ignored and wrong enthroned, then the fires will come back to democracy. And these fires will burn like beacons summoning men to a finer and better world. Oh, amen. Amen. I long for this day, and I do think we're starting to see it. I do think people are starting to realize that they cannot allow wrong to be enthroned anymore. And I believe that the passions of this, the stoking of the flames under people that have been asleep in indifference for so long, I think it's going to cause some battles. And that's okay. That's okay sometimes. It's okay to go into battle. And I'm not necessarily meaning actual like war with real weapons and stuff, but just, our words, having debates, those kinds of things. If they're just and they're right, it's not wrong. And we don't need to be afraid of it because truth always wins the day. And I do think we are starting to see that tide turn. Thank goodness. Thank goodness. And so one thing that we have to also remember when talking about passions is don't just have passions over things that you don't like. Make sure you have passions for things that you absolutely love. For me, my passions are my faith in God, my Catholic faith, my family, truth, and there's other things, other minor passions, like I love my home state of Kansas, and I love, K-State football and things like that. I'm very passionate about those kinds of things. Those are, like I said, minor passions, but the main passions in my life, God, family, truth, friends, those kinds of things. If you walk into my house, you will know immediately what I'm passionate about, what I love, because I try to incorporate our Catholic faith in every room in our house pretty much. And so if you walk in, you know that we are a Catholic family and we are not afraid to show our faith to others. And I hope you walk into my home and realize how much I love my family. There's pictures of our family members all over the place, mementos of loved ones that have passed on. Those all mean a lot to us. And you walk through my house and it tells a story of, our lives, the people that live in this house. It tells a story of our life. And I love that about my home. I love that when you walk in, you know what this family is passionate about and what we love. But mostly I just want to encourage you that, if you feel like you just can't be super duper passionate about every major issue that comes up, that's okay. That's okay. Find the things that you are most passionate about. And it doesn't mean that you don't care about the other ones, but find the things that you are most passionate about and fight in those areas. Work in those areas to bring about positive change so that we can see the light of Christ in those areas and we can bring back truth and goodness and beauty and all those wonderful things that we know as Catholics are right. And so, don't be discouraged if people are ridiculing you for not saying something about everything. No, find what you're good at, find what you feel most equipped to be passionate about, and then, find a way to work yourself into that cause. So that is all for today, Catholic Pilgrims. I will see you back here for week 22. And until then, live the faith boldly and travel well.